from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. I'm live again from Milwaukee, not from the Sun Terrace because it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit here today. I was woken up very early with a phone call to learn that Dame Alison Rose, until recently the CEO of NatWest Group, is to receive a £2.4 million payout for breaching my client confidentiality. I might have a thing or two to say about that in just a moment. ULEZ goes ahead as we learn that Sadiq Khan is using nothing more than cod science. It'll do nothing for air quality in outer London at all. And a big debate taking place here in Milwaukee, but just as exciting, what on earth has Donald Trump said to Tucker Carlson? That interview going out at the same time this evening. But before all of that, let's get the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Nigel. It's just gone 7 o'clock. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Russia says Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin may have been among 10 people killed in a plane crash north of Moscow. These images are purportedly... No, those are not the images. Apologies. It's understood 9 others were on board the aircraft, and these are the images, which are purportedly in the moment the plane fell out of the sky, which was en route to St. Petersburg. TASS news agency is reporting there were 7 passengers and 3 crew members on the flight with Prigozhin's name on the list, and we'll bring you more on that as we get it. In other breaking news, the majority of Wilko stores are set to shut in the next week. The GMB union, which represents more than 3,000 of the company's staff, says it was told a raft of redundancies will follow. The stricken retailer tumbled into administration 2 weeks ago, putting the future of its 400 shops in doubt. Former NatWest Chief Executive Dame Alison Rose is set to receive a £2.4 million pay package a month after quitting. Dame Alison resigned following the row over the closure of our very own Nigel Farage's bank account, but is still working her 12-month notice period. Investigations into her actions are still ongoing after she admitted discussing personal banking details with a journalist. The company says it will continue to review her planned pay and bonus payouts based on its findings. A lawyer for the parents of babies attacked by convicted killer Lucy Letby says they were fobbed off by a hospital boss. The former medical director of the Countess of Chester Hospital, Ian Harvey, has been accused of shamefully failing to address their concerns. He's since apologised for not communicating more fully at the time. Experts are hailing the UK's first womb transplant as a medical milestone. A 34-year-old woman in England received the organ from her older sister and is now planning to undergo IVF later this year. The operation at the Churchill Hospital in Oxford took about 17 hours. Around 50 babies have been born worldwide following womb transplants. And India has become the first nation to land near the moon's south pole.
देख सकते हैं कि हम लैंडर मॉड्यूल
The history-making Chandrayaan-3 is hoping to find samples of water-based ice on its mission, which scientists say could support human habitation. The country is only the fourth to achieve a soft landing on the satellite. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called it the victory cry of a new India. The UK Space Agency has congratulated the Indian Space Research Organisation on its success. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nigel in Milwaukee.
Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, I'm still here in Milwaukee. And you've seen the breaking news that the former leader of the Wagner Group, the guy that attempted that coup, Mr. Prigozhin, has died in a plane crash north of Moscow. We'll learn more details, I expect, over the next day or two. By the looks of the aeroplane going to the ground, I would suspect that it was hit by a missile and shot down. We'll find out more as time goes on. It was pretty obvious, I thought, from that very moment that he launched the coup, that he wasn't going to live very long. If you cross Vladimir Putin, whether you're a journalist or a military commander, you just don't live long. And the other 9 people that died, well, to Putin, they're simply collateral damage. Now, my day started here rather earlier than I thought it might. At 6 o'clock, the phone started to go mad, as I learnt from a phone call that I picked up that Dame Alison Rose, yes, the former Chief Executive Officer of the NatWest Bank with its 19 million bank accounts, was to receive a £2.4 million payoff. Now, I thought to begin with, perhaps it was some form of sick joke. After all, think about what she did. She broke client confidentiality by telling the BBC's business editor at a dinner that I was a customer of Coutts Bank. She then, of course, went rather further than that, because in doing this and in saying that the amount of money in my account had fallen below the limit that you could read about on the Coutts website, she broke every single major rule and law that is set out for the banking industry by the FCA, the regulator of that sector. She then lied and tried to cover up the whole thing by saying, while she did say that I was a customer of the bank, she did not disclose any financial information, something directly contradicted by Simon Jack, the BBC's business correspondent. Now, if you were an employee of NatWest Bank and you did even a fraction of the things that she's done, you would be presented with a plastic box. You'd be told to pick up your personal possessions, to be out of the building within 5 minutes, and I very much doubt you would even get your monthly paycheck. But in the case of Dame Alison, no, the whole board conspired to try and cover the thing up, to try and keep her in her position, and then there had to be another late-night emergency board meeting after the government intervened, where she was not sacked, as she should have been, but no, she was allowed to resign, and therefore she gets £2.43 million in compensation. It isn't just reward for failure, it's actually reward for breaking the law, for breaching and for lying. And here's the worst bit. This bank, through its own greed and stupidity, which we had to bail out to the tune of £45 billion in 2008 and 2009, is still, because of its continued failure, 39% owned by us. So all of you as taxpayers, in a way, have contributed to this great big paycheck that Dame Alison is going to get. My modest request to the bank, that could they please help me with some of my legal expenses that I've racked up in having to fight her lies, have been studiously ignored. They're hiding behind an inquiry. They've kicked the whole thing into the long grass. They've appointed a city legal firm headed up by a man, Chris Hale, who himself has described Brexiteers as xenophobes and racists. What hope, what chance is there of any form of independent inquiry? And even my own subject access request to NatWest, so I could find out what personal information Dame Alison had about my situation, even that has come back after the normal statutory 30 days, and I've been told that my case is complex, and therefore it cannot be answered until the end of October. So before the inquiry, before any chance of a truth comes out, she's been awarded this pay package. I think the whole thing is a complete disgrace. And frankly, I think her behaviour and that of Sir Howard Davis, the chairman of the board, one of those great serial failures in British public life, he really is, I think we should be calling into question their knighthoods. I genuinely do. Sir Fred Goodwin, who previously headed up the RBS Bank Group, as it was known before it became NatWest, he lost his title for doing far less than these two have done. And I think the government, given that it owns 39% of the shares on our behalf, should act. I am disgusted, but maybe you'd pick that up already. Well, I wonder what somebody experienced in this world thinks, and I'm joined now down the line by Daniel Hodson, former CEO and financial director of Nationwide, and of course, before that, one of the bosses of the life market in the City of London. Daniel, have I got anything wrong here? I mean, she breached confidentiality, she broke the FCA rule book, she lied about it, and the board tried to cover it up.
You're absolutely right. You've put it beautifully, Nigel, as always. And I agree with you absolutely in principle. I think there's an awful lot of answering to be done here. I think one of the most fascinating things is to see what result comes out of this investigation, because, you know, the relationship between a chairman and a chief executive is very close indeed. Certainly that's my experience. And it's almost symbiotic. And you cannot believe that a lot of what was going on before it all became public was actually known not only to Sir Howard Davis, but also to the board. And it would be very interesting to see whether Mr. Chris Hale and Travis Smith actually uncover this. I also totally agree with your point about there being one rule for the senior people and one rule for the ordinary person. This is absolutely the most egregious breach of confidentiality, something once taught from the very beginning in banking. And it's a terrible shame, because it's undermining our prime industry just at the moment when we need it most badly, because to shore up our economy, we've got all sorts of regulatory opportunities yet to be fulfilled, and we need to get it going much, much better than it is without this kind of distraction.
Well, I agree, Daniel, because, you know, financial services is Britain's biggest industry, and these actions, frankly, have trashed our reputation around the world. Now, look, you're a man of great influence in this whole financial world. Can't you have a word with the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Can't you have a word with the government? Because they hold in trust 39% of the shares of this bank. We are, jointly and collectively, the biggest shareholders. And I just don't see how Dame Alison and Sir Howard can be allowed to get away with this.
Well, I think it's the board too, and as you would no doubt know, there are all sorts of communications with both the Chancellor and indeed the City Minister on this particular score. It's very, very important for the future. And I think that it's important also, if the money does go to Dame Alison, and this is perhaps something for your viewers to consider, that if she gets all that money, why doesn't she give it to charity? And you might even ask your viewers what sort of charity she might give it to. She might think about giving it to debanked charities. Or she might think about giving it, to homeless or invalided armed forces personnel who are sleeping on the streets, compared with some 1 or 2 illegal people coming into this country via the channel. How about that for a thought, Nigel?
Very good thought indeed, Daniel. Delighted that you joined me and commented the way that you did. And please put some influence on the government. You've got more power than I've got in this regard.
We're doing
Daniel
our best, Nigel.
Thank you. You certainly are. Thank you. Now, next Tuesday, midnight, Monday night into Tuesday, will come in one of the most iniquitous taxes that I've ever seen. It is the ULEZ expansion. And the only people that will pay the £12.50 a day charge are the poor, the elderly, those that can't afford brand new cars, and people, sole traders, running their own businesses, driving old vans around. And it won't just be those living in Greater London, it'll be those living in the counties all the way round the outside of the capital. And what has really come to light in the last few days is the whole thing is based on a false premise. It's based on Khan telling us that this is all about air quality, it's all about the threat to life that we get from living with pollution. And yet, have a look at this graph and you'll see that the ULEZ expansion in terms of particulates in the atmosphere is going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. And the thing that really annoys me is we on this programme revealed that Article 143 of the Greater London Authority Act of 1999 gives the government, gives the Transport Minister the ability to overrule Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, on the grounds that it's not consistent with government policy and that it would have an upsetting, damaging effect on those living outside Greater London. And yet, Rishi Sunak's lawyers have advised him not to press the case, so the government's going to do nothing. This will come in next week. It'll damage and hurt those that can least afford to pay it. And they'll use it, the Tories will use it, to play games at the next London Authority elections and mayoral elections, which take place in May next year. Well, I'm joined down the line by a supporter of the ULEZ expansion, Tom Burke, chairman of the climate think tank E3G. Tom, you and I disagree on ULEZ, but can you not see that the £800,000 of taxpayers' money that was paid to Imperial College to produce the so-called science about the damage that these particulates and nitrous oxides would cause, that the ULEZ expansion isn't going to help any of that?
What I can see, Nigel, is you've been reading the Daily Telegraph again, and I'm not sure it's good for your health. I don't know whether there's any accuracy in the Telegraph story this morning about the science. I really don't know that. I'm inclined to take the science when I see it in peer-reviewed pieces, peer-reviewed publications, then I take the science seriously. When I take the Telegraph reporting on what it thinks the science is in the middle of a campaign it's conducting against improving the air quality for kids in London, I'm inclined to be a bit suspicious.
Well, Tom, it's not just the Telegraph. You know, it's pretty clear from Imperial College themselves that even the inner London ULEZ expansion had almost no effect on particulates whatsoever, but a marginally tiny benefit on nitrous oxides. But when we go out to the rural areas at the edge, I mean, my point to you is this. If there is no air quality benefit, is it not surely wrong to tax the poor?
Well, of course that's true, Nigel. If there's no air quality benefit, I just don't believe the source you're using for the evidence that there is no air quality benefit is correct. I think that's a bad source, and I would treat it with some suspicion. If you
hang on, Tom. I
can read that.
Yeah. Imperial College themselves said that the inner London ULEZ had only a very, very tiny benefit, and therefore the outer one is so negligible it can't actually in any way make a difference.
But who said? Imperial College don't speak. Who said for Imperial College? Who's the actual spokesman for Imperial College? I don't believe it. If there's some scientist somewhere
You don't believe
who
it?
said something, that doesn't mean that that's the truth.
Well, Tom, I suppose, as human beings, we all tend to believe the science we want to believe, but Imperial College were perfectly clear. Inner ULEZ made little difference. You and I will go on agreeing to disagree
but let me tell
on
you
this
something
one.
that I do believe, because it was said by a coroner.
Yeah.
And a coroner said it was air pollution in inner London that killed the baby Emma. And I do believe that because it was said by a coroner.
Look, I think if you live in inner London next to a major 24/7 roadway, clearly that amount of pollution is going to have an impact. My point is, there are parts of outer London that are quite rural. It's going to make no difference at all. But we'll talk to you, Tom, next week after this ULEZ expansion comes in, because the government have bottled out. They bottled out. They could stop this, and even if they lost the court case, they would push this to beyond the next mayoral elections, and I'm very angry with them. Now, in some ways, I suppose polling is a bit like science. It is a science. We tend to believe the polls that we like and disbelieve the ones that we don't. In a moment, James Johnson's going to join me to talk about where's the Republican Party right now, where is Trump right now with the upcoming Iowa and New Hampshire polls.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
There will be 8 contenders on the stage tonight here in Milwaukee. One person who won't be here is Donald J. Trump. But kind of, even though he's not here, he really will be here. He'll also be appearing on X, as we must now call Twitter, with a big sit-down interview with Donald J. Trump. And I'm joined by Senior Advisor to Donald Trump, Jason Miller. Jason, I get why he's not here. We don't need to argue about that. He's 45 points ahead against the other Republican candidates. There's the Reagan precedent going back 40 years. There's no need for him to be here. But isn't it a bit mean to do a big interview with Tucker Carlson and for that to play on air at the same time as these 8 men and women are on the stage here in Milwaukee? It's a bit mean, isn't it?
I would say it's a bit smart to go and completely dominate the news cycle, have everybody focused on you and not on the other folks who might be at 1, 2, maybe even 3% in the polls. That's a little bit of the genius of President Trump, is he knows how to work a news cycle, how to dominate the media flow, probably greater than any politician in history outside of yourself and your political days.
He is superb at this, but the point I'm trying to make is, isn't the Republican Party, isn't the conservative movement in America about more than just Donald Trump?
Well, President Trump has remade the Republican Party really in his image. And in fact, the way that he's changed politics in America is so radical, in a sense, that even Joe Biden has left a lot of his policies in place on trade and other populist type measures. But what a lot of folks in the UK might not realize is that when you said President Trump is ahead by 45, it's maybe a little more like 46 points. Certain parts of the country, it's at 60% that he leads by. With him leading. He's also leading in the general election against Joe Biden. So President Trump's ready to take the fight to Joe Biden and start that general election matchup, which will be the rematch of 2020. He wants to get to that.
But are we saying, it's quite interesting this, because one or two of the big Trump supporters say, hey, you know, tonight's debate's irrelevant. And yet you're all here. Why are you here?
Well, we're never going to miss an opportunity to talk about the president and hype him up.
All right.
And a lot of folks who are watching don't see this on the ground. There's a greater level of support here on the ground with supporters and people with signs and surrogates and allies that are out working on behalf of President Trump than all of the other campaigns combined.
Are these 8 people that I'm going to watch and you're going to watch debate this evening, are they valueless?
I wouldn't say that. In fact, I'd say that there are several folks who are running against President Trump who could be a part of his administration in the next point. And President Trump isn't shy about his campaigning style. In fact, as we look to the number 2 candidate in the race, well, I say currently number 2 because he's dropping like a rock in the polls and other folks are moving ahead, but Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida.
You guys really do not like Ron DeSantis.
Well,
now,
I wouldn't say, I did bring, so folks can see, we do have a bingo card and President Trump calls him Ron DeSanctimonious. So we have a bingo card here for this evening. So as you're watching it, has a number of his verbal clutches, like when he says end of the day and woke. A couple things, folks is another word. Actually, I just used it, so I guess I can't knock him on that. But words like narratives. But we also have some fun things in here, like Ron plagiarizes Trump. He pronounces his name differently. Sometimes he says DeSantis. Sometimes he says DeSantis.
I mean, you're launching a war against this bloke. I mean, he's the governor of Florida. I mean, Jason, I know that Trump sees what DeSantis has done as disloyalty. I understand that. I've been in political leadership at a lower level, but I have myself, and I understand that sometimes people who you've helped along suddenly turn against you, or that's how you feel. But, I mean, he is the governor of Florida. He did win by 20 points. Is this guy not an asset to the conservative movement?
Well, I think that Ron DeSantis believed too much of his headlines after his re-election win in 2022, and he thought his standing nationally was much better than it actually is. I think if you look back, President Trump really was the reason Ron DeSantis was elected in 2018, and President Trump sees as a big sign of disloyalty that DeSantis has chosen.
Well, I can see that.
But here's the fact of it is that President Trump could be spending that time going after Joe Biden right now, going after his record on inflation, that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, all the other terrible things Biden's done with the southern border, but instead he has this distraction that you could say from folks who are 46 points behind when it comes to Ron DeSantis. Okay. And Ron, at this point, if his numbers keep going down, why is he even staying in the race?
Is it possible that on the platform tonight we get some fresh injections of ideas into the conservative movement? See, to me, I think this debate is important, and I think there are 1 or 2 candidates, one I can think of in particular, who's very much a new kid on the block, who is perhaps putting forward some quite refreshing ideas for the Conservative movement and where it goes in the next decades to come. That surely matters.
Oh, it does. And Vivek Ramaswamy, who I think you're going to possibly have on the show this week.
He's coming on tomorrow.
He's coming on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Very impressive. I've liked a lot of what I see from Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's someone that could be a good ally as we move into the future. I'm also impressed by Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina. He's someone who I've known for over a decade and really have a very high opinion of. And I think they're, again, people who've worked with President Trump in the past or even in the future. But when you talk about the policy ideas, I'm glad you get in this because you're the one who really reset the global debate about globalism, so to speak. All of the ideas that you see tonight are essentially going to be echoes or copycats of President Trump's ideas. So when we talk about getting the economy in the U.S. back to a good place, well, that's what President Trump had. You talk about sealing the border. Yeah. That's what President Trump... They're largely just going to be mimics.
We might get some new stuff. You never know. We might get some new stuff, and we should be open-minded about that, surely.
I should hope so. I should hope that we see some new things and we get some... But we haven't seen it so far, and I think that's one of the things that's really been a disappointment from the field, is that a number of the people who are on stage, there's no value proposition to why they're running. What is it that you look at? There's a gentleman named Ada Hutchinson, who's a former governor of Arkansas. Yeah. He's at 0.5%. But why is he running
Jason,
for president?
There are some people running who just want to tear chunks out of Trump. I get that. I understand that, and that's a very good reason for him not to be here, given he's so far. I get all of that. I buy that. I really do buy that. But I have to say, Jason, I've no idea what's been said to Tucker Carlson. What sort of bombshells are we going to get at 9 p.m. Eastern Time this evening?
I think you're going to see President Trump really start to make the pivot toward the general election with some of his commentary about President Biden and Vice President Harris. He has some pretty tough words. President Trump does not pull punches. He goes very, very strongly. I think there are also a couple of fun questions that are there. I think we might get some long-awaited answers to extraterrestrial life. I'm not going to spoil anything.
Well,
you got to tune into X or Twitter.
UFO guys, please tune in later.
Tune in later. So there are a couple of fun things, but no, there's a very serious policy discussion about where America has gotten off track, what we have to do to get back. And the great thing is Tucker Carlson's he's a fabulous interviewer. The way he's able to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and get to the issue, and it was great to see.
He's a clever guy. Final thought, Jason, as senior advisor. And of course, Donald Trump sometimes will take your advice, and other times, I've no doubt he'll tell you your fortune, because that's the way he is with people. Do you think that the pick for vice presidential running mate is important?
Yes, but I think it's going to have a different construct than it was in 2016. You can look back to 2016 and say that then Governor Mike Pence, who was the governor of Indiana, then became the vice president. In a sense, he filled a certain need, a certain strategic need.
And it worked.
And it worked. He won 306 electoral votes. It was a fantastic win. I think President Trump will look at it a little bit differently for 2024, and he's going to go to someone who he thinks can be essentially the ideological flag bearer that can maybe continue on after President Trump is in office, someone who he gets along with. Okay. I would not look at this as, say, checking a box of some characteristic or demographic. Okay. I think it's going to be someone that he looks and says, this person gets me, this person gets the populist movement, and if this person is ready to ascend to the presidency at a moment's notice, it's going to be much more of that and kind of his gut feel as opposed to a calculation.
One or two potential clues there from Jason Miller. Jason, thank you for coming back on the programme and sharing those thoughts with us. And in a moment, we're going to get the polling. Let's see if Miller's right. Let's see if Trump really is miles ahead in Iowa and New Hampshire, which are going to be the first big tests.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
So polling, I mentioned earlier that when we get polls we like, we love them. When we get polls we loathe, we say, well, it's a load of rubbish, polling's always wrong. Got to tell you, I did that for years in British politics. James Johnson, who of course made his name polling in the UK, but is now here with Jail Partners full-time.
I am, yep, moved to New York, we're polling the race.
And so Jason Miller there making some outrageous claims, saying that there are parts of the country within the Conservative movement, albeit, where Trump is up to 60 points ahead of the nearest rivals. Give us the scores on the doors. What's the latest update on all of this?
So nationally, Trump is leading really far ahead, but obviously the way that the presidential nominee is chosen is not on a national vote, it's by state, and the first two contests are Iowa and New Hampshire.
Just explain briefly to a British audience how these work.
Yeah, so basically you have a sort of schedule of state contests. As I say, Iowa first, that's a caucus, so basically attendees who are registered Republicans or indeed independents that register on the day go along and they sort of, they don't even vote on that one, they sort of stand in corners relevant to the candidate and then it's totted up. In the other contest, they cast a ballot. And then they then go into a sort of complex procedure, depending on the state, to allocate delegates. And come the convention, come a big meeting like our party conferences in the UK, the delegates are appointed and they then nominate that nominee.
And of course the big Republican convention will be here in Milwaukee next August, almost exactly in a year's time. So, and we've seen this rolling series of these caucuses, these contests that go on state by state. Iowa #1, New Hampshire #2, and over the years we've seen frontrunners disappear in a cloud of smoke and people come through. Are the Trump team right to be as confident as they are?
Well, when you look at the individual state polls, so we did a poll last month in Iowa, and when you look at that, you've got Trump on 43%, DeSantis on 17%. So it's a big lead, but not quite perhaps as big as those national polls, as we were saying yesterday. Yeah. Tim Scott coming up in third on 11, Vivek Ramaswamy on 5. When you look at New Hampshire, similar numbers for Trump, 42, DeSantis on 15. There it's Chris Christie in third place, with Tim Scott on 8%. Now, it's worth saying that in the last couple of weeks, Vivek has jumped up in those New Hampshire polls to third place, so a bit of a pinch of salt needed there. So, Trump is in a very strong position, but in those earlier states he's at a little bit more of a disadvantage. Thinking about tonight, though, we've got a poll out this morning, and we asked Iowa caucus goers whether they thought that Trump's positions on various policies like abortion, gun rights, etc., were too conservative, too liberal, or about right. We know from some of the briefings that some of those candidates are going to try and attack Trump from the right tonight.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of people people in our poll said his positions are just right. It's, Trump has a sort of Goldilocks moment at the moment with these voters, and that gives him a lot of protection.
Isn't it funny? Because in Britain, people look at Trump and say, God, he's really right-wing. But actually, within American republicanism, he's kind of to the centre, left of centre in the party, isn't he?
Yeah, and he doesn't say an awful lot about abortion, for example, where some of the candidates have been very strident, particularly Mike Pence, Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
But it's almost like it doesn't matter, because the affinity of the voters with Trump the man means that the policies don't matter as much. It's kind of like Jeremy Corbyn in reverse in the UK. They like the policies, they didn't like the man.
Looking ahead to the general election next year, it's very early, and polling can be notoriously inaccurate in America. Jason Miller there saying that Trump's ahead of Biden, assuming Biden's the candidate and Trump's the candidate. Is that what you think?
So in our polling, we've shown it basically a bit of a dead heat between Trump and Biden. Some do show Trump ahead, some show Biden ahead. It's very difficult to poll it at this stage. The one big disadvantage Trump has is amongst the independent voters. When we did a match-up, we matched up a number of potential Republican candidates with Biden. All of them led Biden amongst independents, apart from Trump. Now, if Trump can get the turnout up and get Biden's turnout down, that might not matter. But that's his current Achilles heel, really.
And that's where the right vice presidential pick could make a difference.
It certainly could.
That's my feeling. James Johnson, we're going to talk to you a lot over the course of the next
and tomorrow we've got a snap poll coming. Television exclusive here on GB News.
Bring it to us.
We will tell you who won the debate.
Let anybody else have it. Thank you very much, James. We'll see you tomorrow. Now, a couple of what the Farages that I just absolutely have to give you. The first is that COVID is coming back. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Government action on COVID is coming back. Indeed, the White House, over the last 48 hours, the Biden administration advising people to get the booster jab, to get the flu jab, and the RSV jab. Yep, all good Americans will go and get 3 more jabs. The whole of America is to resemble a pincushion, because that's what President Biden thinks you should do. And there are signs that COVID rates are picking up, and in accordance, medical-grade masks are now to be worn at one of the biggest Hollywood studios, and indeed at one of the colleges at Atlanta University. Folks, are we just going to sit around as the autumn and winter approach and allow governments to do to us again what they put us through over the course of the last 2.5 to 3 years? I think actually we're getting very close where the time is to stand up and stick up 2 fingers and to say, the hell with you. At least that's my feeling. And one other little thought, and this is interesting. India today have managed to land a probe on the moon. Craft has landed on the south pole of the moon. No other country has ever managed to achieve this before. Prime Minister Modi, who's down at the BRICS conference in Johannesburg at the moment, has said this is a great victory for a new India, and talking about loads more investment going in to the science sector. Well, good for India, as they spend their money on space probes, as they spend their money on the military, they spend their money on nuclear weapons. Still half of the country lives below the poverty line. But the biggest injustice of all is that since 2016, between 2016 and 2021, we in the United Kingdom gave £2.3 billion of foreign aid to India, and indeed our contribution next year to India in terms of foreign aid is going up by 70%. And I want to put it to you folks, I don't think we should be giving a penny of your money in foreign aid to a country that could have enough resource and money to put landing craft on the moon. I think most of you will agree with that, maybe some won't. In a moment, we're going to talk to a man called Byron Donalds. He is a Congress member from the 19th District in Florida. He's very much a new kid on the block, and he's here. He's here at this debate as a surrogate for Donald Trump. In a moment, I'm going to find out why.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. Okay, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, one of the dangers of doing live television, of course, is number one, we plan to do it from the roof and the weather made it impossible. The second one is you can book these amazing guests, but you never quite know whether they're going to arrive. But I'm really pleased to say that Barbara Donalds has made it. Now, you will not be well known to an audience outside of the States. There's a lot of, how can I put it, Byron, a lot of chatter about you. A lot of chatter going on the edge of this debate. Just briefly, just tell the British audience who you are and where you're from.
Well, from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. I live in Florida, member of Congress down there in the middle of my second term. I'm a finance guy. I'm a money guy. I worked in banking, insurance, financial services. But growing up, I was never a political person. You know, we grew up poor.
At all?
No. I didn't care about politics growing up. I cared about sports I cared about girls growing up, obviously, and just having a good time. My mom, we were poor. It was just her and my sisters, and she really stressed for me to make sure I got a good education and make something of myself in life. And politics came much later.
So you did well at school?
Yep, I did pretty good.
Yeah, you got into banking. By the way, I've been through a big recent debanking row that's been going on in the United Kingdom. And I saw here in America, just yesterday, a story breaking that a Christian charity from Memphis closed down by the Bank of America. You've got this problem here too, haven't you?
Yeah, we do, and it's something that we got to stop immediately. And one of the things we have to figure out in financial regulation is making sure that banks don't start going through this process of debanking people, basically playing politics through our financial system and our financial institutions. It's just not right, period. One of the reasons why the American economy has been really the bastion for innovation and capital formation is because unless you're doing something criminal, you're largely left alone to just do what you want. You can bank anywhere, you can borrow money as long as you can pay it back. You pay for what you want, you buy what you want. If you're doing something nefarious, then you can get investigated and they'll do that work. But for the most part, you're free to do that here in the United States. That kind of stuff needs to stop immediately.
No, I've been fighting it hard across the other side of the pond, I can tell you. So why politics?
Honestly, I turned on House Financial Services when I was 31. And I saw a bunch of members of Congress talking about the financial collapse at the time in our country, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And, as a young guy who's working in the field...
People in politics didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, I know. But they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't understand what was happening in our economy, yet these are the people who were making the economic decisions, the policy decisions for the country. It got me involved and got me engaged in politics.
And you are a forthright supporter of Donald Trump. You're actually here at this event as one of his surrogates. Why Donald Trump?
Because he can get the job done. First of all, with what's going on in the world, let's talk a little foreign policy for a moment. Anybody here think that Vladimir Putin's going into Ukraine if Donald Trump is president? No. Anybody think that we're going to lose 13 men and women at Hamid Karzai International Airport leaving Afghanistan? No.
That was shameful.
Does anybody think that we would have to leave 4 embassies under the watch of Donald Trump? Absolutely not. Joe Biden has evacuated 4 United States embassies in 3 years. That's insane. Never happened in our country. Wouldn't have happened with Donald Trump. Secondarily, I think that if you're going to have somebody lead our country and really do the work of cleaning out our federal agencies, and there's a lot of cleaning house that needs to occur.
Well, we did hear that in 2016, didn't we? We did hear it. I mean, Trump achieved a lot in the first term, and I was very much a supporter of his, as you probably know. But when it came to draining the swamp, that proved to be a little bit too big for him, didn't it?
Well, look, I think it's big for almost anybody, first time in politics, on this side of it being elected, really coming to face with the depths of the deep state and the swamp. And look, no other president has been under investigation.
The deep state is not a conspiracy theory. That's what you're saying.
Oh no, it's real. And what it is it's lobbyists, it's staffers, it's people in media, it's consultants. It's all these people who are tied into this web that hovers around Washington, D.C.
Yep.
And so when you come in from the outside and you want to actually do business the way business is normally done, they're going to push back. What's the first thing that they did? Not only did they spy on his campaign, they launched a 2-year investigation that they knew was fraudulent and phony that came from Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama was briefed about it. Joe Biden was briefed about it, and they let it occur. It's not simply just spying. It's turning our very institutions against a citizen and against a president. So now that he's been through that, he knows exactly what needs to be done, who can be trusted, and who can't be trusted to get the job done for the American people.
I think he made mistakes in 2017 when he first came into the presidency. He perhaps trusted some people that maybe did let him down very badly. And by the way, we have a mirror image of this in London. Much of the same thing that you guys are sat there, the Russia hoax, all these things. We've been through exactly the same thing. Here's the problem, Byron. You see the man's qualities, you see his courage, and in many ways I do as well. And yet, talking to our pollster James Johnson a moment ago, Trump with the base, he is a superhero. no question about it. Never been a political figure that's attracted that level of adoration from his supporters, of disgust from those that are on the other side. But to win this general election next year, you've got to get that middle ground, haven't you? And isn't that where his problem is? Aren't there middle ground voters saying indictment after indictment, drama after drama, maybe it's all a bit too much? How do you get the middle ground?
Well, actually, I don't think that. I think what middle-of-the-road people are seeing is, wait a minute, okay, I have my own personal feelings about Donald Trump, but 4 indictments in 4 jurisdictions, this is nuts. At the same time, when the president's son, Hunter Biden, gets to evade taxes and evade a gun charge with a slap on the wrist, like, that's just gross unfairness. I think the American people understand that.
So you think fair-minded people say what's happening here is wrong?
I think fair-minded people can look at this objectively and say, listen, no matter how you feel, this is not right. And it's indicative of what's happened to our country and our government. And if we're going to save our democracy, if we're going to save our republic, you can't leave people in charge who spy on the American people, who wanted to look into the bank accounts of the American people, who suppressed the free speech of the American people, who were telling the American people they had to take a COVID shot, who were telling the American people they're going to decide the gender for your kids. Those are all middle-of-the-road positions that people are vehemently against, and Donald Trump is on their side. And I'll give you one more. Black families, it's harder for them to make ends meet and to build wealth in this country. They were doing it when Donald Trump was president of the United States. Our economy is stagnating and people are falling behind. They were doing much better when Donald Trump was president of the United States. I tell people all the time, this election is going to be a choice between 45 and 46. Who did it better?
Do you really think that,
Yes, I do.
that Biden's going to be their candidate?
Yeah, I do.
They're going to stick with
I
him?
think so. I think they're going to stay with him.
He keeps falling asleep.
Yeah, so what? So does every other Democrat. What's your point?
Well, I tell you what, you've got some elderly members of your party too, particularly sitting in the Senate. But I have to say, Barr and Donald's, a real pleasure to meet you. You bring a fresh injection, I think, into this American election debate. Tonight, any thoughts who might come through and do well?
So I got to tell you, I think you're going to kind of see somewhat of a stalemate. I think if anybody really breaks through, it'll probably be Vivek. He has the ability, from what I've seen of all the candidates, to make a moment. I think the most pressure is obviously on Ron DeSantis. This has to become his coming out party. And, he's going to have multiple people on that stage who are not going to want that to occur. We'll see how that works. But I think Vivek is probably the only one that can stand out. But at the end of the day, listen, man, I respect all the guys that are going to be, and ladies, Nikki Haley, are going to be on this stage tonight. But there's a reason why heavyweights don't box with middleweights. Donald Trump is the heavyweight champ right now.
He doesn't need to be here.
Yeah.
Byron, absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you very much indeed. And that brings us to the end of this live show here from Milwaukee. But in a minute, Patrick Christys is going to pick up for the next hour. Patrick, what have you got for us tonight?
Yes, absolutely loads, Nigel. We are, of course, kicking off with that breaking news that Yevgeny Prigozhin appears to have died in a mysterious plane crash. I suppose that's what you get if you decide to launch an unsuccessful coup against Vladimir Putin. I'm also going to be talking about ULEZ, whether or not Rishi Sunak should have taken Sadiq Khan to court, having a look at foreign aid. I'm also going to be looking at this womb transplant and whether that sets a dangerous precedent for whether men will be able to now give birth and whether or not that's completely unnatural. There's loads more as well. You're going to have to tune in to find out, Nigel.
I hope not. Very good. Well, an action-packed hour coming up with Patrick Christys in just a minute. I'll be back here live from Milwaukee tomorrow. After this debate, we'll have Vivek Ramaswamy as our special guest tomorrow. I hope for your sakes the weather, which is about to come up, is not quite as hot back in the UK as it is here.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Showers for many of us over the next 24 hours, even across southern areas where it has been relatively warm and fine over the last few days. It's going to turn cooler as low pressure starts to sink south. As that happens, some intense heat over the near continent will spark some thunderstorms through the evening and overnight, those affecting northern France, but some showery activity could just spread into southwestern parts of England and then eventually other parts of the English Channel coast overnight. Some heavy rain also affecting much of central and northern Scotland. In between, a lot of cloud cover and a warm night for many, especially towards the south.
But it's in the south where we're going to see some lively activity first thing, some heavier rain predominantly, with the thunderstorms that develop across northern France generally staying around the Channel or across the near continent. Much of that moves out of the way, but still some showery rain for the southeast into the afternoon. Heavy rain moves through northern Scotland, replaced by showers. Showers also affecting Northern Ireland, but actually for northern England, West Wales, southwest England by the afternoon, plenty of fine and bright weather to come. Feeling a bit cooler, and Friday's certainly a cooler day across the UK. Low pressure will bring a northwesterly airflow, a bright start to the southeast, but elsewhere a lot of showers coming through on a brisk northwesterly breeze. In between some sunny spells and a similar setup for Saturday, a mix of sunny spells and showers and cool for many.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles